Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Siti Salwa binti Mana, which me metric number is 303806. Now, our group, which is Group 9, are going to discuss about the contribution of Alvin Hanson and A.Samuelson in developing the ideas of Keynesian school. And we also would like to discuss about the post-Keynesian and the new Keynesian school of economic thought. In the Keynesian approach to economics was further developed and expanded by several influential economists after the ideas of John Maynard Keynes became widely known. These economists modified and improved the Keynes theories, helping them become part of the mainstream economics theory that used nowadays. Among the most prominent economists that has contributed in the development of the Keynesian theory is the Alvin Hanson and the A.Samuelson. Meanwhile, in this topic, we will discuss about the contribution of Alvin Hanson, the contribution of A.Samuelson, the development of post-Keynesian economics, and the development of the new Keynesian economics.
Assalamualaikum and hi, my name is Nurnada binti Ahmad Termizi and my matrix number is 307846, and I want to talk about the contribution of Alvin Hanson in developing the ideas of Keynesian schools. Alvin Hanson was born in 1987 in Vibot, South Dakota. He received his PhD from the University of Wisconsin in 1918. He taught at the Brown University, the University of Minnesota, and later Harvard University. He joined Harvard in 1937, 1 year after Keynes published the general theory. In 1927, he published a business cycle theory, which made him a leading microeconomic scholar. At first, he criticized the Keynes works, but after deeper study, he changed his mind and became a strong supporter of Keynesian economics. Because of his strong advocacy for government intervention, people call him the American Keynes. Now let me talk about the fiscal policy seminar at Harvard. After Hanson converted to Keynesian economics, he and his students made Keynes work the main focus of their seminar. This seminar became very influential. According to Richard Musgrave, one of the attendees, and I quote, "The seminar left a deep impact on the future development of microeconomy and public policy in the United States." Many of Hanson's students later become famous economists. They include Alvin Doma, Paul Samuelson, James Tobin, and others. Hanson did not just study economics, he trained the next generation of economists who would spread Keynesian ideas. In 1941, Hanson published his most important book, which is Fiscal Policy and Business Cycle. In this book, he supported the Keynes analysis of the Great Depression. He also argued that the government should use active and continuous policy to stabilize the economy. Hanson often testified in front of Congress to share his view. His student Paul Samuelson said this about Hanson, and I quote, "Hanson was much more than the American Keynes, being an important character in his own right." Samuelson also said, "The basic C+, I+, G model that every student learns today is just a watered down version of what Hanson created back in the late 1930s. Now let us look at the Hanson first major contribution, the ISLM model. In 1937, an economist named John Hicks pointed out a problem in Keynes theory. He said Keynes theory was indeterminate, meaning it could not determine the interest rate and income at the same time. Hanson then took his article and developed it further. He explained in the two of his books. The first is Monetary Theory and Fiscal Policy in 1949. Second is a guide to Keynes in 1953. The ISLM model became the standard way to teach Keynesian economics. So what does ISLM means? The IS curve show equilibrium in the good market, that is investment equals saving. The LM curve show equilibrium in the money market, that is liquidity preference equal money supply. Where these two curves cross, we get the equilibrium interest rate and national income. This is figure 22.3 on page 6 on our textbook. It shows the ISLM equilibrium. The vertical is the interest rate. The horizontal axis is a national income. The IS curve slope downward, the LM curve slope upward. Where the meet in the equilibrium point, Hanson also showed the fiscal policy like government spending will shift the IS curve. Monetary policy like changing the money market supply will shift the LM curve. This model become a very powerful tool for analyzing the effects of government policies on the economy. Let us move to Hanson's second major contribution, which is the stagnation thesis. In 1938, Hanson published a book called Full Recovery or Stagnation. In this book, he argued that investment spending would never be enough for the economy to reach full employment. He gave 4 reasons for this. First, population was no longer expanding at the same rate as before. Second, the pace of setting new areas had greatly slowed down. The frontier was closed. Third, technological change happened input not steadily. Fourth, there were no new major industry like railroads or automobiles appearing, so Hanson was worried that the economy would face long-term stagnation. And finally, Hanson was not a pessimist. He believed the government could solve his problem. His problem was something called compensatory finance. What does that mean? It means that when private investment is not enough, the government should increase its spending to fill the gap. The government compensate for the lack of private demand. Hanson argued that government spending is not just for emergencies, it is needed permanently to maintain full employment. The textbook also notes that in the retrospect, Hanson worried about stagnation seemed wrong because the United States experienced strong growth after World War II. However, government spending did increase as a percentage of GDP during those decades. So some economists still debate whether growth would have been as high without the government spending. In summary, Alvin Hanson was a leading American economist who made Keynesian ideas practical for American policy. He created the ISLM model, he developed the stagnation thesis, he trained a whole generation of economists. That is why he called a American Keynesian. That's all from me. Thank you.
A.Samuelson was born in 1915 in Gary, Indiana, in the United States. He later became one of the most influential economists of the 20th century. Samuelson studied economics at the University of Chicago and later continued his study at Harvard University. After completing his education, he began teaching at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, where he spent most of his academic career. Samuelson made significant contributions to many areas of economics, especially macroeconomics and economic theory. Because of his important work in developing economic analysis, he became the first American to receive the Nobel Prize in Economics in 1970. His work greatly influenced how modern economics is studied and taught today. Samuelson played a very important role in spreading and developing the ideas of John Maynard Keynes after the Great Depression. Keynes introduced revolutionary ideas about how government spending and aggregate demand affect economic activity and employment. However, many of Keynes' ideas were difficult to understand because they were written in complex theoretical style. Samuelson helped organize and simplify these ideas using mathematical models and clear explanations. He translated Keynes' theories into a more systematic form that economists and students could easily analyze. One of Samuelson's biggest influence was his famous textbook titled Economics, published in 1948. This book clearly explained important Keynesian concepts such as national income determination, fiscal policy, and economic stabilization. Because the textbook was widely used in universities around the world, it helped spread Keynesian economics to millions of students. As a result, Keynesian economics became the dominant economic theory taught in the mid-20th century. Another important contribution of Samuelson is the multiplier accelerator model, which became one of the foundations of modern business cycle theory. In this model, Samuelson examined how two important economic concepts interact to explain economic fluctuations. The first concept is the multiplier effect, which was first developed by Richard F. Kahn and later used by Keynes. The multiplier effect explains that an increase in investment or government spending can lead to a much larger increase in national income. For example, when the government increase spending, workers and business receive additional income. They then spend part of the income on goods and service, which creates additional rounds of spending throughout the economy. The second concept is the accelerator principle, which was discussed earlier by John Morris Clark. The accelerator principle suggests that investment depends on the growth of demand or income. When demand for goods increase, firms invest more in capital goods such as machines, equipment and factories in order to increase production. However, if the growth of demand slows down, investment may fall sharply. Samuelson analysed how these two principles interact with each other. With encouragement of Alvin and Hanson, Samuelson used mathematical methods called different equations to study this relationship. How show that change in national income depend on two main factors: the marginal propensity to consume, which determines the size of the multiplier, and the accelerator coefficient, which measures how solely investment responds to change in economic growth. Samuelson demonstrated that when the multiplier and accelerator interact, they can generate cycles in the economy. This means the economy may naturally experience periods of expansion followed by recessions. Because of these insights, the multiplier-accelerator model became an important explanation for business cycles in modern macroeconomics. Next is algebra of income determination. Samuelson also helped simplify Keynesian ideas by expressing them using algebraic model. By writing economic relationships as equations, economists could analyze how different variables affect national income. One important equation used in Keynesian analysis in the national income identity, which is y equal to c plus I plus g plus x minus n. This equation shows that total national income depends on consumption, investment, government spending, and net exports. Samuelson used these equations to demonstrate how change in spending, especially government expenditure, can influence total output and employment in an economy. This mathematical approach made Keynesian economics more precise and easier to analyze. Next, Samuelson also used algebra to explain the relationship between consumption and income. For example, consumption can be written as C equal to A plus BY, where A is autonomous consumption, spending that occurs even when income is zero. B is marginal propensity to consume, which is the portion of additional income that people spend, and Y is income. By combining these equations, economists can determine the equilibrium level of national income, which occurs when total output equals total planned spending in the economy. Using algebra allowed economists to clearly see how change in investment, government spending or consumption affect national income. This mathematical approach made Keynesian theory more precise and helped economists analyze economic policies more effectively. Next is investment function, investment equation, which is I equal to I null plus ZY, where I null is autonomous investment and Z marginal propensity to invest. This reflects the accelerated effect, where investment increases when income rises. Next, other components. Government spendings is G null, exports is X null, imports depend on income is M equal to M null plus MY, where M null is autonomous imports and M is marginal propensity to import. Next, equilibrium income formula. This is total income depends on autonomous spending complex multiplier. Next, multiplier and leakage. The multiplier becomes smaller when saving increase, tax increase, and import increase. The multiplier becomes large when investment responds strongly to rising income. Another important development related to Keynesian economics is the Phillips curve. The Phillips curve describes the relationship between unemployment and inflation in an economy. The concept was first introduced by A.W. Phillips in 1958. Phillips studied historical data from the United Kingdom between 1861 and 1957 and discovered that when unemployment was low, wages tended to increase more rapidly. On the other hand, when employment was high, wage increase were slower. This observation suggested that there is a trade-off between unemployment and inflation. In other words, policies that reduce unemployment might lead to higher inflation, while policies that reduce inflation may result in higher employment. Later, Samuelson and Robert Solow applied this idea to the United States in 1960. They created a Phillips curve for the US economy by plotting unemployment rates against inflation data. Their analysis suggested that policymakers could choose different combinations of inflation and unemployment depending on their economic policy goals.
Hi, my name is Norli Shakira binti Muhammad Rashid and my metric number is 304059. I will be explaining about post-Keynesian economics. Today, we will explore the developments since Keynes, focusing specifically on the post-Keynesian school. To start, it is important to understand that post-Keynesian completely reject the neoclassical synthesis, such as the traditional ISLM model. They believe the synthesis diluted the truly revolutionary core of Keynes' original thought. Intellectually, this school is rooted in the 1930s work of John Maynard Keynes himself, Michael Kalecki, and later Piero Sraffa. It was heavily driven by a group of prominent scholars in Cambridge, England, including Joan Robinson, Nicholas Caldor, and Luigi Pasinetti, alongside American economists like Sidney Weintraub. Unlike mainstream economics, their core focus emphasized international institutional dynamics, historical time, and radical uncertainty in economic behavior. Moving on to their specific theories, let's look at how they view value and pricing. First, they hold a neo-Ricardian value, which draws from Piero Sraffa's 1960 work. This theory focuses on a secular production process where commodities are essentially produced by other commodities. Crucially, they argue that relative prices are determined strictly by technology and the distribution of income between wages and profits, meaning customer demand does not dictate prices. This feeds directly into how they understand market pricing. In modern economies dominated by the massive oligopolistic corporation, firms are price setters rather than price takers. They set their prices above current costs to ensure that they can retain enough profit to finance their future planned investment. Therefore, prices do not reflect short-term demand condition. Instead, when production costs rise, these firms simply increases their prices to maintain their markup over cost. So the final slide covers the macro dynamics of the post-Keynesian frameworks, money, growth, and policy. First, they champion the concept of endogenous money. This means the money supply isn't fixed by the government. It responds naturally to the needs of trade and changes in the wage levels. As Keynes pointed out, money comes into existence along with debt. When wages and costs rise, firms are forced to borrow more working capital from banks to finance their inventories, which causes the money stock to expand. Second, they point out a pronounced cyclical instability. Because market economies rely so heavily on corporate investment to keep national income and output growing, the system is inherently unstable. Investment is hostage to shifting waves of business optimism and pessimism. When investments drops below the level needed for steady growth, the economy recedes and unemployment rises. Finally, this brings us to their view on incomes policy. Post-Keynesian argue that inflation is not caused by too much demand. Instead, it is a fundamental conflict over how income is distributed. A class struggles where workers fight for higher wages and oligopolistic firms fight for their profit share. Because traditional monetary and fiscal tools fail to address this social tug-of-war, post-Keynesian argue that we need a permanent incomes policy to deliberately coordinate wage and price growth.
Hi everyone. Next, I will present the New Keynesian School of Economy 2. New Keynesian economics is a modern development of Keynesian theory. They reject the post-Keynesian call for income policies, citing the resource misallocations resulting from these policies and the poor historical success of wage and price control in reducing inflations. The main focus of New Keynesian economy is to answer an important question: why do rich occur and why does unemployment persist over time? According to this school of thought, the key reason is that price and wage are not perfectly flexible, especially in the downward direction. This means that when economic condition worsens, price and wage do not adjust quickly enough to restore full employment. Because of this, the economy may remain in a state of low output and high unemployment for a prolonged period. The central concept in new Keynesian economy is downward price and wage rigidity. In classical economy theory, when aggregate demand falls, price and wage are expected to decrease. This reduction should help the economy return to its full employment level. However, New Keynesian argued that this adjustment does not happen smoothly in reality. When aggregate demand decreases, firms do not significantly lower price and wages do not fall easily. As a result, output decline and unemployment increase. Let we see on the diagrams when aggregate demand decrease and shift from 81 to 82, price level dropped to P2. Real output will temporarily fall from its full employment level QF to less than full employment output Q1 at point B. This leads to the nominal wage fall and aggregate supply curve shift to AS2. At point C, the output back to full employment QF. This process simplified describe the classical viewpoint. However, for New Keynesian, the price and wage inflexible downwards, so economy will move from point A direct to point B. Real output will fall from QF to Q2. The unemployment associated with real output Q2 will persist until aggregate demand return to AE1, AD1. Instead of self-correcting, the economy can remain stuck in a recession. Therefore, Keynesian conclude that market forces alone are insufficient to restore equilibrium in the short run. This leads to an important policy implication where the government's intervention is necessary through fiscal and monetary policy to stimulate aggregate demand and stabilize the economy. New Keynesian economists identify several key reasons why price and wage are rigid. First is menu costs. Menu costs refer to the costs associated with changing price. For example, firms may need to update price lists, reprint catalogs, or adjust systems. Even if demand falls, firms may choose not to lower price because these costs can be significant. As a result, price remains sticky. Second is formal and implicit contracts. Wages are often determined by long-term contracts between employers and employees. These contracts prevent firms from reducing wage easily, even during economic downturn. In addition, many workers operate under implicit agreements, where firms maintain stable wage to preserve trust and morale. Therefore, wage reductions are rarely observed in practice. Third is efficiency wage. Firms may pay wage above the market level to improve worker productivity, reduce employer turnover, increase motivation. This also can help to reduce the labor cost. If firms cut wage, workers may become less productive or leave the company. Therefore, firms prefer to keep wage stable even during recession. The last explanation for wage equity is the insider-outsider theory. In this theory, insiders are workers who already have jobs, while outsiders are unemployed workers looking for jobs. Even if outsiders are willing to work for lower wage, firm may not hire them because realizing workers involve hiring and training costs. Current workers may also refuse to cooperate with new lower pay workers because they see them as a threat to their jobs. As a result, firms prefer to keep existing workers and maintain current wage levels. Therefore, wages do not fall easily and unemployment may continue during economic recession.
For the conclusion, there are a lot of contributions from Alvin H. Hanson and Paul A.Samuelson in developing the idea of the Keynesian theory. Both of them succeed to influence the development of post-Keynesian and new Keynesian theory. Therefore, Alvin H. Hanson and Paul A.Samuelson made important contributions to the development of the Keynesian economic theory. They expand the ideas of John Maynard Keynes and help make the Keynesian economics part of mainstream macroeconomic theory nowadays. Hanson emphasized the importance of the government spending and fiscal policy in reducing unemployment and economic recession, while Samuelson helped combine Keynesian and classical ideas through the new classical synthesis. Meanwhile, their contribution also influenced the development of post-Keynesian and the new Keynesian economics, which continue to shape modern economic theories and government policies today.